So in this video, we're talking about 4 common mistakes to avoid when moving to Portugal.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Dawn.
And we're the Unretirees. And I can't say last year anymore because it was in 2023 we decided to say no to the traditional retirement path and instead move abroad and work remotely. And we do that from the Silver Coast of Portugal. And this channel is about living abroad, flexible streams of income, and travel over 50. And if this is the sort of content you like, we encourage you to like this video, click on the subscribe button, as well as click the bell so that you're notified of any new videos that we put out. Also, you can follow us on Instagram at The Unretirees, and you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter, and we'll leave the link below in the description.
So today we're talking about 4 mistakes to avoid when moving to Portugal. And by the way, if you ever want a deep dive on any of these topics that we talk about in our YouTube videos, we do have a Moving to Portugal online course. I'll leave a link below to where you can get more information on that. But let's jump into 4 common mistakes.
Well, so what do you think is the most, we'll call it the most important mistake to avoid when moving to Portugal?
Well, I just want to preface this by saying that I think all 4 of these are things to think about before you even make the decision to move to Portugal, because I think they're all worth considering and can kind of be make or break. And so the first one that I would say I think it's the most important is to really understand the tax implications of moving to Portugal. And I'm not talking about the general tax implications, like I'm going to pay this rate in the US and this rate in Portugal. I mean, it's a whole new ballgame, and everybody's situation is so unique that this isn't something you can Google. It's not even something that you can watch YouTube videos about, as genius as we think our YouTube videos are. It really is something that is worth investing in hiring a professional accountant or tax person to talk to who's familiar with the laws here in Portugal, but also some of the scenarios that expats have, somebody who works with expats here in Portugal. Now, for us, we actually paid for 2 consultation calls before we made the decision to move to Portugal. And we used a company called Fresh IP. I think they're called Fresh Portugal now. I'll leave a link below. And that was a really important starting point for us to begin to understand what this was going to mean for our specific situation. And I do just want to say that we are not affiliated with Fresh IP. We don't get a referral, nothing like that. It was just a really helpful starting point for us. And so we want to make sure that you have that resource as well, because we think that this is such an important thing. You cannot have too much information about how this move will affect your personal tax situation. And so we definitely advocate for making that investment, knowing as much as you can before you move over, because there's so many filing deadlines that are different. I mean, if you just think about how complex the US tax code is, imagine trying to figure it out in a different language. And so that is number 1 before you make the decision to move to Portugal. Know as much as you can about your specific situation.
And you're going to want to have a conversation. If you have a US-based tax accountant as well, you're going to want to have a conversation with that person as well, because there may be things that he or she is familiar with based on your specific situation that could be different or could be difference makers for you in terms of how you structure things.
Yeah, we had a few surprises once we got over here from the American side, so definitely check in with your US accountant as well.
Yeah, we don't regret making the move, but there were certainly things about taxes that I think we wish that we knew, that we were underprepared for. And if we had been in a different circumstance, it would have been an awful surprise, right? You know, so.
Yeah, this is one area. There's so many things that are wonderful surprises when you move to Portugal. This is not an area where you want to have a lot of surprises.
That's right. One of the other mistakes that people have is, I think, being unprepared for the differences in banking and investing here in Portugal. And, you know, it's just a different environment. From a banking standpoint, well, it may be very similar to what happens in your own country. There are certainly some differences here that were different for us coming from the United States. I'll give you an example. I mean, we have points cards with American Express that we were used to using to rack up points for both business as well as personal. And over here,
use those for travel.
Yeah, we use the points for travel and for other things. And over here, credit cards are just a different thing. They're just not as used. Very few businesses take American Express here. And so it's just a bit of a different game. So it's worth researching those things to get an idea of some of those differences. I think from an investment standpoint, while investing is very similar here as it would be in other countries, there are certain investments that are unavailable here that are available in other countries. And one of the, just a good example, one of the ETFs that we have used for years in the United States is just an ETF that as residents of Portugal, we can invest in. It's just worthwhile if you are an investor to find out more information from it from a broker who can invest or can have clients who are based in Portugal.
And these are just a couple of small examples, but there's so many of these things that are different that we didn't really necessarily think about before we got here. And they're not big deals. We can, definitely navigate around them, but it is something just to be aware of, that there are differences.
Yeah, from a banking and investing standpoint, none of these are showstoppers, unlike I'd say the tax thing could be in a specific situation. But they're just things that you're going to want to navigate your way through, and they're just different.
Yeah. Another one is underestimating the cost of moving. Now, we have an entire video that we did on this, and I'll link that here above. But there's a lot of talk about how the cost of living here in Portugal is lower.
And it is.
Yeah, it is true. However, I think not enough people talk about the investment that it requires to move to Portugal. And that's different for everybody. Everybody has a different situation. But I think that's why it was so important for us to include that in our course and to have budgeting tools and checklists just to make sure that you have the complete picture before making a decision to move to Portugal.
Yeah, we had no idea when we were moving to Portugal that it was going to cost as much as it did based on our specific scenario and how we handled it in making that move. We don't regret having spent that money, but I think we would have preferred to know ahead of time that it was going to cost roughly that much money in order to prepare for and move here. I think we wish that we had known that ahead of time.
Yeah, if you watch the video, you know that we had a couple of things that didn't go as planned, and that was what just ratcheted up those expenses for us, which is why I think it's important to have an idea up front of what your budget is and what you want to spend on scouting trips and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, and one of the other mistakes that people make is that they believe that they can do this themselves. Look, we're in an era where people feel powerful because they've got Google and ChatGPT and all these other potential resources. And certainly those things are great, but you're going to want to rely on the expertise of other people. So the first level of expertise of other people are things that you would Google, or you would buy books, or you would buy courses or things like that, where you are going to gather information that's big picture information. And all of those things are very useful for you in helping you sort of get a good idea of what you're getting into. But then there are a couple of areas which are very specific that you really aren't going to be able to satisfy what it is that you should know through general research on the web. One is tax expertise, and Dawn mentioned before trying to find a tax expert who is proficient in Portugal taxes as well as proficient in the US taxes. Boy, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other has to do with business consultation. And you may think, well, it doesn't have anything to do with me, but it may. So if you are either a freelancer or if you have an employment position at some place that's outside of Portugal and you're intending to keep that employee job here in Portugal, or if you've got a dream of starting a business here in Portugal, any of those things, it complicates things, and it complicates things where you're going to need to rely on an expert to help you navigate. It may cost you some money to hire these experts. It may cost you some money, for example, to have these tax consultations, and all of that is money well invested so that you are not on the other side of this wishing that you would spend that money.
I mean, you're going to spend a few $100s up front to save thousands and thousands of dollars and many headaches later. So I think it's really worth it. And another part of that I think is really important is in not doing it all on your own is really the expat community. It's so invaluable. They are an absolute wealth of information, and they are going to be, I've said this before, they're an absolute lifeline. And so you want to surround yourself with your experts. You want to surround yourself with your expats, whether that is connecting with people on Facebook in the research process, or going to meetups once you get here, or reaching out to people like us. We love connecting with you guys. We've had an opportunity to actually meet up with a few of you, which we have really loved. So surround yourself with experts, surround yourself with expats, and surround yourself with education.
That's good.
And
The
get
3 E's.
informed. It's the 3 E's of moving to Portugal. Speaking of education, just a reminder about our Moving to Portugal online course. We'll leave information about all of that in the description below. But if you want to know more about our thoughts after living in Portugal for 1 year, watch this next video.